undergrad, everything felt very like natural. You know, you had the experience where like you are the big fish in the little pond, and so I don't think I didn't really struggle with writing in that way. And then getting to graduate school, like it was a whole different story, and feeling very challenged, and like all of a sudden, yeah, writing was something that I did need to access in a way that I never had before, and I had to create like ways of getting into it and sustaining it, and feeling very like alienated actually from like self-expression and in terms of the writing that we do for graduate school. So like that has been like and is still a journey. I think collaboration has been key for like finding that kind of passion and enjoyment in writing, and then also creative writing. I also did the CWP Institute with Kyle, and having like this other genre that you could like play with language in a way that is like not always, you don't always think to do in more professional genres. So that was, I think, different ways to find access.
Well, it depends. It really depends on what it is that I'm writing. But I find, for me, I'm a person that lives very much in my head. So for me, I need to be in a quiet space without distraction. Oddly enough, I don't really think very well through writing on the computer. I actually have to write it longhand on paper first. I don't know what it is, something about that tactile, working on the paper first, that helps me think through what I want to say better than if I stare at a computer screen. So I have to do it very, old-fashioned is not the right word, but definitely it's more of a tactile experience where I can draw arrows and cross things out. There's something weirdly cathartic and really helpful, and for me to do that the computers will not do for me.
Some of the most exciting or important writing that I've done has been in collaboration with others for these presentations of our work as writing program administrators, or ways of thinking about negotiating our identities within a program. And so that has been a way to access what is important to us locally and how we can write that in such a way that it creates other opportunities, right? So writing, this is about accessing writing, but it's also about what writing allows us to access afterwards.
I have like a very complicated pre-writing process that I do before I can't write any part of the draft until I've done all these pre-writing things. You know, whether it's like thinking about it while I'm on a run or while I'm walking in between classes, I'm often, you know, rehearsing in my head what it is that I think I'm writing about, and then sometimes I'm color coding ideas on my notes, or putting different files in different folders to organize myself, and that's all sort of like pre-writing stuff. But for some reason, if I don't have all that pre-writing stuff done, I just can't write the draft.
As I thought about like what is access, I think for me, access means like being able to tap into like what I write. I write everything, but everything that I write has one thing in common, and that's usually expression of self. Writing for me has always been an outlet, and I found it to be tremendously empowering, liberating. Like it gives you kind of voice. It gives voice. So I think really for me, when I access writing, I have to be able to access myself. I have to be able to access like what's really going on inside, or like what are some more critical or curious thought processes I'm having, and being able to actually dive into that and not have any like inhibitions or like, you know, writer's block and being able to get into that. And like a quiet space can help with that sometimes. Sometimes I sit in my car actually and I'm just randomly somewhere and I get an idea and I take my phone out and I just start like kind of like writing, jotting down the idea while it's there, because I don't think I have always control over the access. I can try to cultivate an environment where it's like, okay, maybe it's more accessible, but sometimes it's like, I feel like I get pulled into it.
If it's something I really am passionate about, something I really love, it is running through my head all day, every day, as I'm walking to my car, as I'm doing all these things. And I remember with this particular piece for the Aetna Creative Nonfiction Award, I would be working out sentences in my head. You know, like weeks later, I would just dump it out all on the page. And so that's kind of how I work in certain circumstances when I'm pushed. And it's been really good, but the problem is you have to be really passionate about it to be thinking about it all the time.
I would say I write very multimodally. I think very visually about my writing, so I like to imagine long form writing that I do as having sort of a visual shape, and I'll oftentimes draw it before I start to ink it. And I like to include visuals in my writing as well. One of my favorite ways to write is through comics rather than essayistic text. But I would say that way that I access writing too, that I'm reading, is very multimodal these days. I use a screen reader to listen to a lot of my dissertation research while I'm commuting or walking between buildings, and I'll oftentimes get ideas in the middle of that, and I'll record it on my phone as a voice note right there. So I think that's all writing. It's happening in very different places with very different technologies. So lots of different modes.
I can type sort of a draft on the computer, but I'll print it, even if it's a whole dissertation chapter, I'll print it out and then go through by hand and actually make changes. And I find like I'll write a whole paragraph in the margins. There's something about working with it that way that works for me, and I think has also been a really cool thing to bring into the classroom in terms of access is not just printing it out or trying it by hand, but actually having students cut their papers up into pieces, triple space it and pull sentences apart and try to think about like working with it as a tool has been really useful, I think, in teaching as well. It's not just the moment that you sit down and write the final draft that's writing. It's sort of all the work that you're doing and putting into it until you get there.
I think in terms of my own writing, for me, access really kind of developed out of reading a lot, reading all sorts of things. As a first-gen student, I remember getting to undergrad and even to graduate school, because I took a few years off in between, and realizing that I didn't know how to write the things that we're supposed to write. We write in really specific genres. We write a number of kind of bizarrely structured documents over the course of our career as graduate students. And so I have to just read things constantly, read different models of things, actually spend time breaking them down and sort of like reverse engineering them and figuring out how they work, what they're trying to do, and then how they're doing that, and then trying to apply that to my own writing, which is something that also goes into teaching too, is to work with students, providing access for students, is helping to demystify the process of how to read critically, but also how to kind of look at reading as a model for the way that we can develop our own writing.